So, welcome again. We're so happy to have you. This is the Connecting the Dots, Building a 4-Year Voter Engagement Strategy webinar starting with 2025. This webinar will be recorded and the link will be shared. So you don't have to worry about it. I'm sure you guys will take some notes, but don't feel too eager to take any notes. We will definitely share this deck with you. So welcome again. We have lots to share, so we're going to get started. My name is Cheyenne. I'm the campaign director for National Voter Registration Day, and we have lots to talk about for 2025. So first, again, this webinar is being recorded. We will share the link with you. And at the end of this webinar, you will be able to sign up using a QR code. Travis will also drop the link into the chat, but you will also be able to sign up to become one of our very first community partners for this year. So we are ready to kick off. And you will be able to sign up early to receive your materials because you guys are attending this webinar. So official kickoff is on April 1st to general recruitment. So you guys have first dibs. For any Q&A questions that you have during this webinar, just feel free to drop them into the Q&A box instead of the chat. So if you look on your Zoom function, you'll see that there's a Q&A feature. So drop your questions in there and we'll raise them up at the end of the presentation. So getting started with who we are and what we do, many of you are already familiar with us. And to those of you who are returning partners for National Voter Registration Day, welcome back. We're so happy to have you. So National Voter Registration Day, as you know, is managed by nonprofit Vote, which is the leading provider of nonpartisan resources. So you can check out our biennial report actually for 2023 to 2024 to learn more about the work that we've done over the past few years. Again, this deck will be shared with you, so you will have this link. And about National Voter Registration Day. So to date, we have registered over 6 million Americans across the country in commemoration of this holiday. Last year, we registered 820,000 people to vote or update their voter registration. So bravo. A big thank you to many of you who were community partners last year. I saw League of Women Voters in the chat, and they're one of our favorite partners and longtime partners. Over a quarter of the new registrations were collected by community partners like yourselves. So a big pat on the back for you guys. This was a really amazing year last year. This year coming up will also be equally as amazing, so thank you. Every year we bring together partners of all stripes and sizes from across the country to do this nonpartisan work, and we provide you the tools to be able to do it. As many of you may have seen yesterday, there was an executive order signed mandating that in order to register to vote using the national form, you must provide proof of citizenship. So just wanted you to know that our team will be watching this order closely. We do expect that it will be challenged. So we'll see what comes of it, and we will make sure to keep you guys updated. We are closely watching it and discussing it both internally and externally. So we'll definitely keep you guys updated to know any key updates that impact voter registration and engagement. The rules for becoming a partner, there's just a few. You got to be nonpartisan, 100%. You have to be inclusive, informed of your state's voter registration laws, and non-transactional. But most of all, have fun. It's a wonderful holiday. It's a great celebration. It's a very important day for our country. So just have fun with it. And now we will set the stage for the content of this webinar. So addressing the gaps in civic education is why we're here today. We want you to leave this webinar with a solid understanding of how to build voter engagement into your organization's plans for this year. So understanding that everyone has different priorities, but we've all come together to make voter engagement one of our key priorities for this year. How do we fold in voter engagement into our 4-year plans through communications messaging and actionable plans? So let's set the stage for this discussion. We can start by identifying what the problem is. Addressing a critical issue that is prevalent in American culture, as we all know, is the widespread lack of civic education. Many voters just don't understand how government works or how elections are interconnected. And this is where our role as civic educators begins. Having voters with a general knowledge and understanding of how our political system works, commonly referred to as civics, enhances and improves the functioning of the overall system. So we know that public engagement and trust in the political system is directly connected to how informed and engaged our citizens are. So it's really important that we take the role and take the lead in making sure that everyone feels educated. As you can see from these stats, less than half of US adults can name all three branches of government. It's for many of us, we have been out of high school for a very long time. We don't have to say how many years, but that is kind of where a lot of us receive that core civic education. So with the gap in that, it is impacting our elections as we've seen. And in terms of the solution to poor civic education is really in helping voters view elections as part of a 4-year cycle, not just one-off events. This mindset shift allows organizations like yourselves to build layered engagement strategies that grow over time. So that's why we really wanted to focus on how can we look at these years coming up, starting with this year, as a 4-year plan that's interconnected and gives you themes and tools to help you drive forward the mission and the messaging, but also to easily fold it into your existing priorities. So that is kind of one and done, but also plug and play, less for you to think about. But this approach really is to emphasize the interconnectedness of government so that we can have a more informed electorate. And in looking at the bigger picture, it's also helpful for us to have an understanding of the types of engaged citizens. In this context, citizen does not refer to like legally sanctioned status, but rather participation in community. We know that civic engagement is not one size fits all. Civic engagement looks different for all of us, whether someone is participatory or justice oriented or personally responsible. We need messages and resources that resonate across all types of engagement styles so that we can engage them. And again, you will have a copy of this presentation, so you'll have the context at your fingertips. And now on to how do we connect the dots? So when we help voters understand how elections impact daily life, from school funding to healthcare, we shift voting from being just a chore, not a very fun chore for many people, but to a civic tool. So connecting the dots through civic education really empowers communities to stay engaged, not only in the big splashy election years, but every year, like the one that we have this year. So speaking to that, let's hear what's happening in 2025 from our guest speaker. We are so proud to welcome Debra Lombardi, a national civic leader in engagement and former director of National Voter Registration Day, welcome back, who brings deep insight into what works and what's next for voter registration movements. Debbie, welcome.
Thank you so much, and thank you all for having me today. It feels there's a special place in my heart for National Voter Registration Day webinars, so I'm super excited to participate in one. Awesome. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about this year and how local and state elections matter and impact the next 4 years and even beyond that. So what I want to emphasize and what I'm really aiming to emphasize in this conversation is that the work to participate in and protect elections starts now. So local elections offices that you may be seeing on your ballot can greatly impact how elections are administered. Local election officials make critical decisions that impact elections. They're just where polling locations will be and more. These are just some local offices that may impact elections that voters may see on the ballot this year in the future. You may see city council members who can promote pro-voter agendas in their cities, help with making voter registration easier, things like that. You may see state Supreme Court justice races who may play a role in redistricting and other voting rights issues. You can see a county recorder or similar offices that may play a role in voter registration, maintaining the voter rolls, signature matching for mail-in voting, and more. You may see things like Board of Supervisor or similar roles who may choose where polling locations will be and decide on early voting locations and hours. The Attorney General who may influence legislation or provide interpretations of legislation to inform or bring suits on behalf of the people of their state. And you may see referendums that can cover any broad range of issues that may impact elections. In addition, there will be mayoral, school board, and other elections that people will see on their ballot this year that are equally important to participate in, but highlighting some of the ones that may directly impact elections in your locality or in your state, because we don't often think about being able to how local elect offices impact elections. Awesome. So as you probably know, as you're all very engaged, there's elections happening across the country this year, which is why it's important to sign up as a National Voter Registration Day partner. Um, there are tons of them. These are some that are highlighted. There's a bunch highlighted in AP if you want to read the Associated Press article, but there's ones that will have huge impacts on our country. For Virginia, there's the governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, and other races on the ballot. In New York, there's mayoral races, and in Pennsylvania, there's state Supreme Court, Superior Court races, and municipal contests. In Arizona, we'll see city council elections, and there will be local elections across Florida. We'll also see elections across many of the other states. I see someone in the chat, like, there's also going to be elections in Washington. So these are just highlighting some of them that this article represents as some of the biggest, but we all know that local elections are the most impactful when everyone is able to participate in them and when we are able to monitor them. So all voting is local. Just stepping back a little bit, our work covers 8 states: Arizona, Florida, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. We also have a national program that monitors what is going on in each of their states. And this year we're focused on a bunch of things, but supporting local elections and election administrators, identifying trends for what we may see going into 2026 and beyond, and building resilience in elections for the next 4 years by supporting these local elections. That looks like paying attention to who is running for these offices that can affect local elections and may have a major impact. I wanted to highlight one that is coming up. I think someone also mentioned it in the chat. April 1st is the Wisconsin election. This one has a few big pieces on it that may impact voting rights and what that looks like. There's a constitutional amendment referendum, which a yes vote on the question 1 would constitutionalize requiring a valid photo ID as part of their work and allow the state legislature to define what would qualify. And then there's the state Supreme Court race. Previously, the Wisconsin Supreme Court has ruled in redistricting, and state Supreme Courts often deal with voting rights issues like challenges to restrictive voting laws, ballot access, and more. So this may be something that you look at and you think, you know, how can local elections play such a big role in how we are administering and taking on elections overall? But these are just a few examples of like how big and how momentous that can be. I'm seeing lots of engagement in the chat about people lifting up their local elections that are coming up, and I super appreciate that because we're talking to a group of organizers, folks that are on the ground, that are like doing this work, helping engage people in their elections. And you are the ones who can help provide education and information about how to engage in them. What happens in these elections will impact the next 4 years and how we engage in that. It's no secret that voter turnout in local and state elections is even lower than it is for presidential and midterm elections. But I want to make the case that local elections this year are more important than ever as we see various changes to how folks are viewing elections. We see trust in elections changing. We see how people are viewing the efficacy of elections changing. It is important to show up for local elections this year. It shows a lot of investment in our communities. It shows investment in elections and democracy by paying attention to the elections offices that that could be on the ballot, as well as just showing that people want to show up and turn out for elections. It also shows investment in our local communities, neighborhoods, and in our neighbors and the people that we live near. If we're not turning out in local elections, we're not necessarily looking out for each other in the way that we can, and this allows us to do that. It allows us to show investment in ourselves and in our values. So the things that you deeply care about may be decided at the local level, you know, beyond races that could impact how elections are administered in the future. There are races for people that are running for school board or other municipal positions that can make a huge impact on your communities and your schools. It also shows investment in how your local and state government is spending the people's tax dollars. The last question on here is like, how else does it show investment? What are important things about local elections? Um, and I want to offer that you all can throw things in the chat that you think are important and why you're really invested in local elections for this year. Resources. Yeah, so I wanted to share, thank you to Travis for dropping some of the resources I highlighted in here already. The first is Ballotpedia, that just talks about a lot of the local elections that are happening across the country this year. The second is the AP News article that talks about some of the ones that they think will have a big impact. The third is our website. If you want to learn more about All Voting is Local or get involved, I can also drop my email in the chat. If you are in one of the states that we work in and are not connected to our state teams, we can talk about what that might look like. And the last is an article from Volksmag that talks more about some of these offices that can impact elections in the future that you may see on your ballot. So that one is helpful for thinking about education around what some of the local elections offices might be and how people can think about them when they're thinking about how their elections are administered. Thanks.
Debbie, thank you so much. That was really enlightening. I saw so many messages coming through in the chat saying that there are elections happening all across the year, all across the country. You guys are absolutely right. And we're super excited because our community partners, like Debbie said, are super engaged. You guys know exactly what's happening in your local cities and counties and states. And that's why you guys are our community partners, because you are the trusted sources of this information. So really appreciate that. Please continue to stay informed about the elections, especially special elections that are coming up that may not have dates just yet assigned to them, so that you can kind of stay on top, so that you can relay that information or accurate information. But Debbie, once again, thank you so much for being part of this. We're so happy to have you as a partner and as a former NVRD director, and still just so engaged in this work. So please continue to stick around for as long as you can. I know you have an early jump, but for the folks in the chat, if you have any questions for Debbie, feel free to drop them into the Q&A box.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So now we will move on to building your 4-year voter engagement strategy. We have heard about the importance of this year's elections. So now it's time to start to build the framework for what our voter engagement plans look like. I do want to pause and say, I know sometimes we think about elections year to year. So that's where we're trying to adjust this framework and this thinking a little bit internally, and so that we can communicate that externally. Because if more voters know the interconnectedness between all of these elections, then they'll understand that it's not acceptable to only turn out in federal election years, right? You have to turn out every year. So how can we do our part in making sure that they understand that? In this next part of the discussion, we're going to cover each election year leading up to 2028 and provide relevant, actionable plans and communications messaging that your organization can use for ideating and inspiration. So let's get into it. So starting with year one, as we heard from Debbie, local elections are where trust is built and impact is most tangible. So this year is our build year. We lay the foundation for long-term engagement by helping communities realize their power in local races. Active participation at this level is really important for empowering citizens and to make sure that we're holding local election officials and elected officials accountable. So now that we know the importance, we are building this year, we're starting our voter engagement plans in a 4-year framework. Let's look at some actionable plans that we can implement with a build theme in mind. So messaging themes like your vote, your community emphasize direct impact. And that's a good example of how you can take a very important message, tailor it, and make it as direct as possible. So, with actionable tactics like forums, you can do rides to the polls. We empower voters and remove barriers to participation. So, our theme for National Voter Registration Day this year is around this is an elections year. Elections being plural because there's so many elections happening across the country, and we want to emphasize that elections are happening in states, counties, and cities. So, think of this as an ongoing election year that's happening every month. But as you build these actionable plans, think about what is most relevant for you for this year. What is your organization currently thinking about doing where you can fold in voter engagement seamlessly? When you think about that as well, think about what is your comms messaging, what themes you might be focused on for this year, what are the priorities, and also along those lines, if there's any catchy messaging that you can fold into your ongoing e-blasts, your webinars, any of your social media communications. This is a through line message that you can continue to reverberate to the folks that you serve. In year two, we shift gears a bit and we focus on engagement. So next year, we will be engaging voters in the midterm elections. And as we move into year two of the plan, we're kind of focused on engagement and momentum. So engaging voters through state level issues now so that we can grow their interest and investment in the broader democratic process when we get into next year. This is all about engagement next year. Organizations should focus on building local engagement to expand statewide outreach. And launching targeted campaigns is a really good tactic. So this is when we have more attention from voters. Folks will be thinking about registering to vote or updating their voter registration, and we can boost turnout in these often overlooked elections, but they're very influential. For year two, engaging voters in the midterms has a couple of very fun themes that we can think about. From midterms, make the rules, to power is closer than you think. This is an engagement year, so it's about making state level decisions feel personal. We can focus on activating voters through education, visibility, and relevance. Again, you can do these targeted campaigns. You can continue to run voter registration drives at local businesses, churches, and schools. But here it's really important to think about what you have planned in your 2026 plan for your organization and see again where are the opportunities to fold in the messaging seamlessly. In 2027, we will be looking towards the federal elections. So while this is like a quieter year, it's a great opportunity to prepare. So this is a preparation year. It's the quietest election year of the four, but it's also our best chance to deepen civic knowledge. So to kind of come back to these points around the framework of building civic education, building community relationship is going to be really important in 2027, and educating before the big rush of 2028. So we can prioritize policy literacy, local involvement, and it's also just a good opportunity to get out there and be front and facing with the community. And in 2027, themes like democracy does not take a year off can help us maintain momentum. Civic education's workshops and transparency efforts can help build communities that are ready to act in 2028. So this is a great year to make sure that they are equipped with the tools, that they have the understanding of the connectedness of the years. They understand the levels of government. They understand civic education as a whole. And again, you can think of the comms messaging that is most relevant for the year and for whatever your organization might be focused on for the year. And lastly, but certainly not least, 2028. So when we get there, that is our drive year. This is the year when everyone goes big because federal elections draw the most attention. We can use that to spotlight to turn out voters at every level, especially those that have down ballot races, which often get overlooked. So this is really important for states and local elections that maybe, kind of get overlooked, like I said, for the folks that maybe only turn out in federal election years. This is a great year that overlaps with the local elections happening. So it's a really good opportunity to just kind of piggyback off of those. And from messaging like all in for 2028 or plan your vote, these types of campaigns will help voters prepare, engage, and show up and where they feel equipped. So you can create clear voter guides. You can provide early vote drives, maybe around early vote early day, and influencer partnerships will be key. So now we'll talk a little bit about civic education resources. Again, I will pause and say if there's any questions, please feel free to drop them into the Q&A. And when we get to that section of the webinar, we are going to raise some of those questions up. So we're happy to answer those for you. But if there's any questions around the communications or what 2025 might look like, 2020 versus 2026, we're happy to answer those questions while you have us here today. So a little bit about civic education resources. To support partners year-round, we offer accessible civic education tools. These tools help organizations go above and beyond with voter registration and to become trusted sources of knowledge and empowerment. So I wanted to give you some tips on how to incorporate the civic education into your existing messaging. We talked about the 4-year plan, but here's how you can like seamlessly think about it. First and foremost, civic education should be simple, clear, and grounded in community. By using nonpartisan language, by using storytelling and easy to share tools, we can meet people where they are and keep them engaged. So the number one tip is don't assume. Many voters may not have learned Civics 101, which we're going to talk about as well. Use language that helps them understand the principles of civics. Meet voters where they are. So this is something that you guys are already super amazing at doing as community partners. You go out into the community, you use social media, you plan events. Some of you do voter registration events in supermarkets and in parking lots. But that in-person engagement is really important to reaching folks and showing that you are part of the community as well. You want to use nonpartisan messaging at all times, so avoid any political jargon and keep messaging clear. You want to leverage storytelling, so this is where you can make very relevant examples, real life examples, and create connection in community. You want to provide easy access to resources. So offer those flyers. Some of you have palm cards, which we love. You will have our National Voter Registration Day resources coming soon to you, our fact sheets, our toolkits. But to accompany that, you can also create like digital toolkits that you can send to voters as you are registering them to vote or speaking to them out in the field. But this all makes education seamless. And then encourage ongoing engagement. So make sure that you're continuing the conversation with them and making sure that you prompt them to continue to think about civic education and think about the election years in an interconnected way. So it's also not just about voting, it's also about being part of your community, holding elected officials accountable, etc. And some key themes to build into your ongoing messaging. Again, this is all about just making it super easy for you. So if we think about these themes in like courses, Civics 101 would of course start with the foundations of democracy. So all of these courses are created in mind to help you organize the messaging and identify areas where you can fold it into your existing work. This is really important to just help us reinforce foundational civic knowledge, how government works, why elections matter, and how laws are made. So these you should look at as like the building blocks to creating lifelong voters. So if we start with Civics 101, we start from the foundations of separation of power and checks and balances, Constitution. We move into history, legislation, and lawmaking in Civics 102. And 103, it would be like focus on voting and elections, but then also we get into the local, state, and federal government and the branches, as well as civic responsibility and engagement. And then as we advance into this course, feel free to use this in your own messaging. But Civics 104 would start to introduce the role of media and media literacy and how it plays a role in shaping our elections. Civics 101 would be about campaign and political leadership and discourse. And then the last course would be global citizenship, economic systems, and civic and technology. So again, these are just examples of ways that you can build build in civic education into your existing messaging, maybe through social media stats, maybe through a blog post, maybe through your e-blast, but these are just ideas of how you can incorporate it. All right, so we will pause here and move into the Q&A section. We're going to answer a few questions, and then after this, you will hear about what's next for National Voter Registration Day, including getting your opportunity to sign up to be a community partner, one of the first. So if you have any questions, drop them into the Q&A, and we will go through them now. All right, so we have a few questions that came in that Gwen, who is supporting us, Gwen is our associate director for education and partnerships at Nonprofit Vote. She leads many of our webinars, one of which you guys may have attended just last week, and she's helping us along with Travis to answer some of these questions. So once again, this presentation will absolutely be shared, so you will have access to all of the slides and the resources that are shared within the deck. Any questions coming in? Okay, I see two. So we are focused on youth voters. This is from Cara Pelletier. Apologies if I'm butchering your name. Do you have youth-facing messaging that will resonate with them specifically? That's a great question. We focus on lots of different communities. Youth is one of them, but we kind of, in our toolkits, our existing toolkits, we have a fact sheet on college students. Since youth kind of covers, I think, 18 to 24, which is a pretty broad range, college students are typically the group that registers on their college campuses, etc. So we created a fact sheet for them, which is on our website, and we can share them with you as the community partner recruitment launches. But yes, we do have that. I would also suggest that you look at organizations that focus on youth, because they have very tailored messaging, since their organization's mission is really designed around speaking to this particular group. So Rock the Vote is probably a great example of that, as well as like Pizza to the Polls. They have some really interesting ways and activations for reaching youth. To Anita, yes, you will receive a copy of all the slides of this presentation. So with this recording will be shared with you all. Karen, would apps and programs as to how to contact your elected officials be covered in a civics lesson? Absolutely. So you could do a course on accountability, and what does accountability mean? How to find who your elected officials are, and then how to contact them, but also what to say. So it's very helpful to provide scripts to voters. If they are reaching out for a particular issue, you can guide them on how to talk to the issue, or if they are just kind of reaching out to have a relationship with their elected officials, you can guide them on that. There's many ways that you can introduce accountability, but it's really the introduction that's important. So yes, that can absolutely be a civics course. To Lenona, will you also have a presentation focusing on disability voter registration and education? We don't have one planned just yet for this year. However, one of our big partners is the National Disability Rights Network, and we use a lot of their resources. So we can absolutely share with you any webinars that they might have coming up that might be before ours, but we also have some previous webinars that we can share with you if you look around the Nonprofit Vote website. So those are two resources where if you need some more urgent information, you can pull from those. To Naomi, one of the challenges of working on a college campus is that we see new students coming in and leaving every year. That's right, very high turnover. Any tips for how to shorten, for lack of a better term, this 4-year strategy so we can best support our ever-changing student body? Naomi, that's a great question. I was just speaking with an organization that has spearheaded college university engagement for the past 4 years, and they have done an incredible job, except that our number one contact is leaving because she's graduating. Good for her. She's leaving in May, and she's very nervous about the transition. So this kind of speaks to your question because there's a lot of information that she has to not only cram in for the person that's coming behind her, but for also for that person to be able to communicate it to college students. This is a very interesting topic because college students are super engaged, but you do want to abbreviate a lot of this information. Sometimes college students are a little bit more familiar with civics since they've just come out of high school more recently, and they may have received civic education there. But for those that haven't, it is interesting though to still have conversations with them because you do want to make the information as relevant as possible. So you probably don't want to go from Civics 101 all the way through Civics 106 like the examples that we provided, but you can pull out what are the most relevant topics. You can also find ways to speak to what they might be facing as college students, and that is a great way to kind of start the conversation. So maybe something like, what is transportation like back home, or how often do you use public transportation in the city that you're in, and kind of use that as an example, as a way to kind of enter the conversation and also get an understanding from them of how much do they know about civics and how much do they know about how transportation connects to elected officials in government. Mia, how can we effectively measure the impact of our voter engagement over efforts over time? Mia, that is a great question. And actually, our next webinar for Connecting the Dots Part 2 is going to focus on data. So we want to be able to help you take your voter engagement plans that you're building right now using these tools, thinking about the 4-year framework, and then adding in data tools that you can use for measurement. So stay tuned on that. That will be coming up in May. And it will be directly following or related to the content presented here. And we'll be able to tell you how to use like Google Analytics and tools like that to be able to measure your impact. So thank you so much for asking that. And the last question we have is from Gretchen. Gretchen said, are there tools for addressing disinformation and how can we link them with trusted sources of information? Yes, Gretchen, there are many tools, especially web tools that are helping with disinformation. But as trusted community partners, we implore you to create some of those tools because you can speak best to the issues that your community is facing. So if at all possible, if you're able to create a fact sheet, if you're able to create any kind of palm card or a website or social media posts, one of the important things to remember when addressing disinformation is to not amplify it. So you want to address it by not necessarily retweeting it, although I know Twitter doesn't exist anymore, re-Xing it, whatever. You don't want to retweet it or think about it in that way. You want to dispel the information by correcting it. So that's one of the really key things to remember, especially in digital disinformation. But yes, I would say that community partners are the best people to kind of look at the disinformation and misinformation and malinformation, which may not be intentional, and focus on those so that you can tailor the language and answer it directly.
Cheyenne, can I add to this one? Just
Absolutely.
awesome. Yeah, I think everything you said is completely spot on, especially not about amplifying information on accident by trying to respond directly to dispel it. You end up just giving them more views on their initial attempt at disinformation. The other thing I wanted to say is redirecting them to your local elections office or working directly with your local elections office to create the palm cards. We all know local election administrators are doing a lot of great work. They also do not always have the tech teams behind them to make that work easy and accessible for folks, especially folks that you may be representing in your community specifically. So working directly with them to make sure that you're putting out information or helping them better present the information that is on their website are both great ways also to help combat mis and disinformation.
That's right, Debbie. Thank you so much for adding that. I would also just say that there are many resources from election officials and elected officials that you can go to as trusted resources. Some of our trusted partners are the National Association for Secretaries of State. We have the Election Center. We have the Election Assistance Commission. Election Assistance Commission administers vote.gov, and they link out to the state and local websites. So just piggybacking off of Debbie's point that you can use those websites as your trusted information if you need, more direct answers than what you have available. Awesome. I will do one last check to see if there's any questions. Oh, one more came in from James. James asked, do you have any tips for showing people how to engage with civics in a lower effort way where they can still be involved? One of the things we encounter a lot is working parents or adults who don't have a lot of free time but still want to be engaged. Absolutely. James, this is a great question because I was just listening to a New York Times podcast about how adults generally don't have time to educate ourselves or to stay civically engaged because of what you mentioned, because everyone works so much and we have families to take care of. So Americans typically lean into a lot of sound bites, and that's where we get our education from is sound bites and media. So this is a great opportunity for community partners. And I know Gwen, I see Gwen typing, so you'll have some additional resources there. But this is a great opportunity for community partners to help make this information very seamless, kind of make it plug and play, especially in these types of election years where there's so much happening and Americans are really feeling the strain. If you can in your weekly e-blast or monthly e-blast, maybe just do a summary of civics education, some of like the fundamentals, or maybe pull over nonpartisan news resources, whatever you can do to simplify the information so that you keep your community informed and engaged is a really helpful way. You can also leverage social media to do that as well, and look at some of the amazing partners like All Voting is Local and Nonprofit Vote that work in this field and are constantly putting out these types of information as well so that we can make it easy for community to find. All right. So I think that closes out our Q&A. Thank you so much for everyone. Those were amazing questions. I was expecting just a few, but we got a really great number. So thank you so much for that. And now we will get into what's next. So we are almost in April. Can you believe it? And now it's time to really start to gear up and plan for the holiday. So we are so excited to launch community partner sign up for the attendees of this webinar. So you guys will have very first access. That QR code that you see on your screen is available for you to, you can open up your phone and take a picture of it and it will take you to a link. And that link is where you will sign up to become a community partner. So following this webinar, Travis is also going to drop the link in the chat so you can, there it is. Thank you, Travis. So you can click that link and sign up there. Again, we provide the tools that you need to get started for promotion. But you guys are the first community partners, so I can't wait to see who comes in. Thank you guys again for being here. As a community partner, you can place your order at no cost to you for packages of posters and stickers to display at your National Voter Registration Day event, which will be held on September 16th, Tuesday. We are so excited, and it's probably going to be here before we know it. So coming soon, we will have some toolkits updated for you, as well as fact sheets and resources that will really help you to make voter registration and voter engagement seamless. But in addition to that, we have the upcoming webinars, one of which we shared, and we'll share information about that in the next slide, and social media toolkits and such that you'll be able to pull from, like the comms toolkit. Here's a look at some of those key calendar dates that we have coming up. So April 23rd, next month, we have the Staying Nonpartisan with Nonprofit Vote webinar. So that will be led by Gwen. Then we have the Connecting the Dots Part 2, which I mentioned earlier, which will focus on data. So it will be directly related to this webinar. We will take those 4-year plans and give you some data tools that you can use to measure impact and enhance your voter engagement plan. We have a plan for the Civic Holidays webinar. Many of you are partners in the Civic Holidays like Vote Early Day and National Voter Education Week. So we will be doing a collaborative webinar with them as well. And then we have our standard community partner webinars coming up later in the year to gear you up for National Voter Registration Day. So that will be crafting your comms and social media plans. So we'll give you even more tactics and messaging to use, pulling from our social media toolkit and our communications toolkit. And then we'll have last minute National Voter Registration Day planning just to make sure all the partners feel ready and equipped to go out and do voter engagement. Of course, we will have any information updated for you that is impacting voter registration. So make sure you stay tuned for that. And then again, we have National Voter Registration Day on September 16th. Here is our email, so if you need to contact us to ask any questions at all, please feel free to. Again, you have the QR code there and the link is in the chat, so feel free to sign up and we can start to process the posters and stickers. The mailings go out in August, so we have some time, but you will be one of the first to place your order. We hope this webinar was helpful in prompting you to think about the ways to incorporate ongoing voter engagement into your mission and strategy. Debbie, I want to say thank you again for being part of this. It was really helpful to hear from All Voting is Local. Please follow them if you are not already a partner with them as well. And we thank you so much for attending this webinar. We will see you at the next one, and we'll send out the information links and registration as well as the recording of this webinar. So I hope you all have a wonderful day. Stay motivated. This is a very challenging year ahead, but we are making sure that you feel equipped and ready to roll. So thank you for trusting us, and we are so happy and thankful for your partnership. Take care, everyone. Thank you.